Hi, Dr. Jim Turrell here, and this is my weekly broadcast. I usually do this on Tuesday nights live, but I'm pre-recording this program so that I can send it out to you and you can just listen to it. And the topic tonight is Start Your Life Anew. And the reason this is so important, I'm going to turn some light on myself here a little bit. There we go. Now you can see me better. And the reason this is so important is because a lot of people have a hard time with this process of starting, new. So I'm going to be, primarily because they struggle with a lot of old information that we need to have some tools to deal with, but also we need to have a solid understanding of how mind or spirit works so we can absolutely know that we can start anew anytime we choose. This is so important to know. So tonight I'm going to be covering a good beginning starts with God, let spirit move you, the power of self-existence, and a deep inquiry. So let's start with this business of starting with God. Ernest Holmes writes, "We wish to discover how invisible cause works, its relationship to us and our relationship to it, and how we may use this knowledge. The world is tired of mysteries, does not understand symbols, and longs for reality. What is reality? Where may it be found, and how may it be used? These are some of the questions one would like to have answered." And so the first reality is really, what kind of relationship do you want with this thing that we identify as God? And what is it in fact? So in our philosophy, we say that God is pure spirit and pure intelligence, and we also say that it is a life principle running through all manifestation, that we must suppose that it has substance within itself and that it is self-existent. Now, this seems to be something that we have to take on faith, because there is no way of proving the self-existent nature of God other than to say nobody knows where it begins and nobody knows where it ends, because in our philosophy, as in most spiritual philosophies, there is no beginning and there is no end. There is just cause, and it's functioning by means of this substance which we know it has, but we can't really say that we can accurately describe it all, because that's what physicists have been trying to do for centuries, is describe this substance, but we know it's there, and we know it is self-existent. That means it doesn't need anything to exist to cause it. It is its own cause. So we have a relationship with this, we say in this philosophy. Now, why is it so important that we have some concept of this? Well, because it's sort of difficult to hang out in a world where there's so many loose ends that we don't have a concept to put into that context. Now, the contextual nature of a life is a life that's defined by some idea. Now, a life that's defined by an idea, many times it can be a religious idea, it can even be a political idea, it could be a spiritual idea, but it's a philosophy any way you look at it. In our concept, what we're talking about here is the concept of God, self-existent substance, which is all-knowing, spirit and intelligence, which we have a relationship with, and that relationship is intimate because, as we say in our teaching, it created us. So we want to start with that premise. We want to start that we're working with something intelligent, something spiritual, something that has substance and is self-existent and is always there. And it's always there in us, for us, and working through us, get this, according to our degree of receptivity. If we're not receptive to this idea, it can't function by means of us. It has to function at the level of our receptivity. So, for instance, if I said, well, I don't believe in it, that's fine. Then it can't function according to what we believe in or don't believe in. It has to function by means of our disbelief. And so what it does is it has to keep producing evidence of itself by means of our disbelief. So we don't believe in it, so that means we have to create situations, conditions, circumstances, events, relationships, which keep confirming the fact that it doesn't exist. But it proves its existence by confirming the fact that it doesn't exist within our own frame, because we defined it. Now, I know that might be a little circular thinking here, but if you believe it doesn't exist, then it has to act by means of that belief system. It's done unto you as you believe. Not when you believe, but as you believe. Now, it's not a bad thing not to believe in the substance or the self-existent presence of God. It's not good or bad. It's just the nature of how you think. But what is important is that you have some idea clearly in mind about what you want to believe. Now, I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm saying that you have to make a decision about this. Now, a lot of people have not made a decision to believe in God or know what God is. God is substance, self-existent expression of a perfect intelligence which is spiritual in nature. Now, those are the best words that we can probably attach to that in this philosophy. Now, we want to let this perfect intelligence move us. We want to let spirit move us. So Ernest Holmes writes, since God is pure intelligence and endless being, God is always creating. It is God's nature to create, but being all God must act within itself. The Word of God spoken within itself sets the law, which is also itself in motion. The result is creation. The Word is the mold which, acting through law, produces form. Now, when I speak my word with a sense of real authority, then I'm creating a mold into which this, invisible substance pours itself like water, like you pour water into an ice cube tray. And at some point, at the level of your conviction, it takes form, it takes shape. Just like you have to drop the freezing point to 32 degrees before that spiritual presence becomes a solid form, but we know it's still spirit in essence. It's a great analogy. It's a great way to think about it. But the minute you put it into that place where it can actually create form, then that form manifests itself in truth as an outward experience. So any account of creation implies a universal intelligence which is omniscient and all-knowing, because it has to be omniscient. It means it has to be everywhere available to us at any given time. We cannot be separated from it, and it can't be something that knows us some of the times and doesn't know us any other times. It knows us as, get this, we know ourselves. It can't know us in any other fashion than we know ourselves. But it sees us, get this also, as its perfect, loving creation. So it doesn't see us as anything negative. It doesn't see us as something that's sinful or bad. Why would it create such nonsense? It doesn't. It creates perfection. But only we can interpret that perfection in an imperfect fashion. So we call this intelligence, and we put this moniker on it. There's the name, God. And it just scares the living poop out of people. God! And it seems so overwhelming. But it's just a name. Just like you put a hat on the hat rack, it's just a name. You got to hang it on. You got to hang it on this substance because you're trying to put some identity to it. So we call it God. Now, in philosophy, the word reality is used. In science, the word principle is used. The reality of philosophy, the principle of science, and the God of religion all mean the same thing. The nature of the universe is all one. So that means reality, principles, spirituality, God, all the same thing. Now, why is this so important? It's because, see, a principle defines behavior. Reality defines, the outcome of something or the presence of something. So we have the presence and we have the physical idea of something. We have how it operates as a principle. So when I say that God is love, we're saying that God functions as love, and that is the only real reality which is functioning by means of you and I right now. Now, I know that might be hard to believe because we have such weird and strange ideas of what love is. But love is the unconditional acceptance of the greatest power we can possibly imagine, that is thinking of itself in the kindest, most loving idea of what it created, which is us. And it gave us the same capacity, the same ability. So we also have the power of self-existence. So something else Ernest Holmes wrote. He says, creation means the giving of form to the substance of mind or spirit. Spirit being all and only, there is nothing for it to change into but itself. Therefore, it is the changeless within which must take place all change or manifestation of itself. Creation and experience are eternally going on. But any particular experience is measured by time and has a beginning and an end. I know that may sound a little heavy, a little thick, but we're talking about something that knows only one thing. The nature of God only knows itself, and it created itself it created us in its image, which means that it created us with the same capacity to know ourselves. So the degree that we know ourselves as the living, breathing expression of such a great power, that power then can manifest, create a particular experience for us based upon our sense of love of God, being the love of humanity. This is so important because this isn't a God that's judging you. This isn't a God that's that's, laying down some crazy human rule. This is a God that is free from human rule and is in fact a spiritual rule of love. And the rule of love is that you love God with all your heart and all your mind. Then you love your neighbor in the same fashion as you love God. Now that defines the highest possible behavior on the planet. So in the beginning of any creative series, there is only the absolute intelligence, all-inclusive, everywhere, infinite, waiting to be made manifest into some form based upon the identity that we have of ourselves, our own infinite presence. So the all-spirit could not have the impulse to move unless it were, get this, conscious. Now that's a key word here, conscious, which means awake and aware to its surroundings and its presence in the here and now idea of itself. So a lot of people are not working out a conscious behavior or consciousness because a lot of people are working in the subconscious of emotional memory, historical precedent. And when we have things like emotional memory and historical precedent, they tend to collide into each other, and then they isolate us with fear because we begin to fear the past, or we begin to fear the potentiality of failure and so on. And then we get our sense of rejection. Keeps reinforcing our sense of doubt about ourselves. So guess what? We got to dismiss the doubt. We've got to dismiss the fear. Now, I know, again, it seems unrealistic to be able to dismiss such a strong emotional tug. It's kind of like having a smelly old fish inside the boat all day long, and you say, just throw the fish overboard. And you say, but I can't. It's in the boat. It has to stay here, and we got to let the dead somehow or another flip itself out of the boat. Well, that ain't going to happen. So you got to throw that dead fish out of the boat. You've got to get rid of the dead thinking that no longer serves you. So the all-spirit could not have an impulse to move unless it were conscious. Therefore, spirit is the power that knows itself. And when we know ourselves as God expressing, that's when life begins to move. Now, how are you going to prove it? How are you going to prove it? People say, because the minute you start knowing God is perfect love, then it begins to move by means of you, and that's where the law of attraction comes in. It magnetizes your very presence and essence and draws to you, get this, everything necessary for you to experience. Everything necessary for you to experience so you could absolutely know what was going to happen next and what was important in life. So that means that there is no stagnation once you are connected with spirit, nor should there be any in our idea of spirituality, because the spirit is here to create. It's not here to stagnate, it's here to create. And when it creates, it keeps creating out of itself, its own idea of itself, and this is called change. Change. No, I know not everybody's ready for change because we like to surround ourselves with all the old standards, all the old status symbols, all the old ideas of what we used to be, what we could have been, what we should have been. But who we are is in fact so powerful, it keeps busting it out, it keeps changing its idea of itself. The world keeps changing. And you can't sit around waiting for it to change because it's changing right now. It's changing as I'm speaking to you. So this requires a deep inquiry into something. So Ernest Holmes writes, if we were to examine the basic principles of religions of the world, we would find a great similarity. Each points to one central life, from whose self-existence all draw their livingness, and without which nothing could exist. Christianity is only one explanation and cannot be considered the only light on religion. For there are many others whose combined teachings weave the story of truth into a complete and unified pattern. The infinite must be one, since life cannot be divided against itself. Boy, isn't it cool to know all those other religions are just simply chapters in the book of life? I mean, when you look at Buddhism, the great and fabulous Buddha, and Siddhartha, that wonderful transformation that he went through under the Bodhi tree, and then, being assaulted by all the temptations, but his consciousness, his awareness, translated all that temptation, all those threats, all that intimidation into flowers, lotus petals, just completely dismissed it and said that's not the reality of what life really is, but perfect love is. And the Buddha was perfect love, perfect manifestation, perfect unity, perfect God. Now, what about, the wonderful Hindu traditions of the Atman and the Brahman? The same kind of thing, that perfect love translating itself through these different mentalities of all those wonderful Hindu deities, which represent various aspects of persona. And then we have that wonderful Jewish tradition where you've got Moses, who was leading the children out of Israel. And of course, before that, Abraham, who was establishing this covenant, this amazing agreement with God, that every time that he would go into the world and explore and create and fail and then succeed, he would come back to the oak of Mamre and he would be reconnected again. Just like you and I have to go to church to get reconnected, to get this spiritual concept of ourselves. And then there's the wonderful story of Muhammad, and going into the cave and having this amazing revelation of one's commitment to God. That's one thing that's fabulous about the Islamic traditions, is the level of commitment to God. Boy, if there was any religion that was so committed to God, it would be the Islamic tradition. So why is that the case? Because they saw it wasn't about how rich you were, or about what your status was. It was really about you as a human being. That's probably one of the greatest things from the Islamic traditions, is that they can draw so many people in from so many different levels, because it never was about status. It was about spirit. That's what's important. And then you have Christianity. Christianity, beautiful story of Jesus and all of his teachings, one of the most amazing teachings on the planet. And the parables and the stories Jesus told. One of my favorite is the parable of the sowers. If you go out and you cast your seed on hard ground, it doesn't work, because hard ground, your consciousness is not receptive to the greater good. It's very important that we prepare our consciousness, our mindset, our understanding of life, our beingness. So when we have it all tilled up and we've released and weeded out all negative thinking, all negative thought patterns, then we can plant the seeds of perfect love and perfect relationships and perfect career and perfect prosperity, and they come up and they blossom and they bloom. All seeming change is merely the play of life upon itself, and all that happens must happen by and through some perfect action, some inner action. Isn't that amazing? That it all happens on the inside, and then it translates itself out into our experience. I know, it's like, I know that's so hard to believe, because you might say, well, I didn't create that experience. That experience was nothing. That thing that came up was certainly surprise and unexpected. That's because there's so many things in our subconscious mind and our subjective beingness that's wrapped up in an emotional ball of fear and resentment. When we finally break it open, it just comes spewing out like a volcano. But then after a while, that volcano calms down, and we can see that even though a lot of things have shifted and changed as a result of our own revelation, our own explosion of consciousness, but it's still turning into something greater and better. And that's what's important here. The inner power is, in fact, the Word of God. Now, I know that peace prevails in your life. I know that love expresses in your life. And I know joy is now manifesting exactly as who you are. God bless all of you. Have a great week. And I'll see you on Sunday. We start our new tradition with The Alchemist on October 2nd. Join us. Thanks. Bye.